Hi, friends. It's time to catch up on what's new and exciting in the world of PPC and beyond. I'm Navah Hopkins,
And I'm Fred Valles.
and this is What's New and Exciting, brought to you by Optimizer. Fred, you were just at SMX, quite literally.
Yeah, I just wrapped up my session there. I basically wanted to talk about some of the life hacks that I've been using generative AI to be more efficient as a person. And some of that goes down to PPC, but some of that is just like, how do I manage email? How do I manage blogging? How do I manage taking all of these convoluted thoughts in my head and spitting out something that's maybe a little bit more digestible by people? So I've been using a lot of tools, and whenever I talk to people, they seem to find that interesting. So I was like, let me do a session around that. And big bonus, you got to watch it. But my singing, my avatar learned to sing, and I do a little bit of dancing in the background as well. So if you want to see that, you got to sign up for SMX Advanced.
For sure. And everyone should go sign up for SMX. It's really huge that they made it free. So just from a learning accessibility standpoint, it's amazing. What would you say your top go-dos off of that session were? Like if you had to pick maybe one, at most three, what would the top go-dos be?
So one thing that was eye-opening to me was I attended not a whole lot of sessions, but a few, and I was watching mostly the questions and the comments. And it just reminded me that there's a lot of people out there who are doing marketing and who have fairly novice basic questions. And so I think we always come at it from the perspective of we've been doing this for 20 years and this is old hat and who cares? And then you literally get questions like, ooh, scripts are cool, but do you install code on your website or do you have to put that in Google Ads? And so sometimes being reminded to go back to the fundamentals and the level set with people, right? We talk about so much of this nuanced detail, but that's all lost on people if they don't know where to even start. And so just a good reminder that what may sound boring to us is refreshing to some people out there. And I think if you're managing clients, that same perspective, right? Don't assume that they know every acronym in the space. Don't assume that they know what like value-based bidding is or why that's helpful.
What's interesting is that it's not just about remembering that things are useful or that someone may actually need those foundational ideas, but that you actually need the repetition. There are things I talked about in 2016, 2017 that I'm seeing bubble up now as, oh my God, this is this new strategy, this new idea. It's funny for me because I know that when I said it, and I am confident you had said it maybe 3 or 4 years prior. And it's just this virtuous cycle of repetitions. It's very much important that you don't assume that your clients, that your colleagues remember every brilliant thing you've said, every brilliant thing you've done. It's okay to repurpose that content. And I think one of the things that's so special about your session is that it was a really actionable way to use tools that I know I've heard you talk about those tools in a lot of different sessions, but this was the first time that it actually felt useful. Like I could go do. You tied each use case very well. So talk notes, I've heard you reference so many times. I keep meaning to get it for myself because I know I could definitely benefit from it. I do a lot of editing work, even when I do dictation.
Yeah, and talk notes, I've loved it. Now, our co-founder, our CTO at Optimizer, he actually built a little standalone page that does much of that same work for you. So we'll put that in the show notes. But freebie tool, anyone who doesn't want to sign up for Talk Notes. Now, Talk Notes is a lot more polished than what we built. But again, it's just about giving you a way to try these capabilities for free, and it'll take your convoluted thoughts and turn them into a nice outline for a blog post or whatever you want to do with it.
So before we move to other news of the day, were there any other really standout ideas at SMX, any sessions that really stood out to you?
So one thing that dovetails with what you were saying and like these old ideas being new again, there was a session, I think it was Menachem or Niels Roymans, and they showed the quadrant of how you analyze your products based on their performance. So for example, when you're looking at products in your merchant feed that you're advertising, you can think about it in complicated terms like which of my products have no impressions versus which products have tons of impressions, tons of clicks, and high return on ad spend. And that all is very wordy, right? But what if you simplify that down to the concept? What are my product heroes? What are my zombies? And you label things. And now the label of zombies, that's basically the stuff that has no impressions. Your product heroes, those are the things with tons of impressions, tons of clicks, high return on ad spend. And these are like verbal shortcuts that make it so much easier to talk about these concepts in meetings with your boss and meetings with your colleagues. And I think that really gives legs to these concepts so that people persistently keep talking about them as opposed to meander and get confused about them and then like relabel things.
It's really funny. The philosopher Kant has this idea of perception, and that an idea can, or a thing can be real, but until you perceive it and you've been given the tools to perceive it, it's not actually going to manifest. And I think that's probably, if when we think about PPC philosophy and just how to get your brain to think about having those conversations, that's the most useful is come up with something that everyone else will know and put it in that context. SMX was great. What about Apple?
Apple had their worldwide developer conference this week, and they introduced Apple Intelligence, which obviously is a play on artificial intelligence. It's a more private version of AI, and that's driven by Apple's hardware announcements and their ability to do these things in edge computing. They also announced an integration with GPT, which is going to make GPT across all of their products, the software, the phones, the Mac OS. So very exciting. And I think fundamentally what this is, it's going to put AI in front of more people who may not have consciously decided to go to the ChatGPT website or to use one of these newfangled tools. But if generative AI basically sits in your Notes app or it sits in the operating system that you use every day, you're going to be exposed to it more. And I think that really dovetails then into the post that I did on Search Engine Land, which is about, we got to think about a future of advertising where generative AI is omnipresent. It knows a lot more about you. And maybe the signals that it has become more important than sort of these legacy keywords that we've thought about for a long time.
So, two really interesting thoughts, or at least I think they're interesting. Number one, the community pounced on that news and positioned it as a Trojan horse, that the ChatGPT integrating and generative AI integrating with Siri is that a way for Microsoft to get into Apple devices and muscle Google at least to a 50-50 share on devices? Because for a really long time now, it's been essentially a monopoly. No real comment on the pros or cons of that or whether that is going to happen, but it is interesting that is generative AI a path forward for software that previously wasn't available to become available? The other thing that's interesting to this, the Google side, is that there's a tool called Timelines where you can enable it or not, and it's entirely a privacy question. And what I find really fascinating is that Apple has found a way to deliver that service without compromising your privacy. So when you turn that on with Google, you're going to get a much more personalized experience. I often talk about how my personal persona is perfect when it comes to what ads get served to me, what organic results get served to me, because I essentially share every bit of data that I can. I'm basically an open book. And because of that, when I do various searches, it will factor in where I've been. And I tend to travel a lot. So it's able to very quickly pick up on, okay, Navah, you were in New York on Monday. You're now in Bologna on Wednesday. You're going to be back in New York next week. You're going to go to Iceland in a couple of weeks. Like, you're all over the place. The average user, they tend to assume that if you're in a non-usual location, especially a different country, you're going to be there for a bit because it's a vacation. But Google has learned enough about my traveling patterns that it knows, okay, I got to accommodate for that. So I'll be very interested to see that with the privacy mechanic, can Apple actually meet that? So we'll see.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think your point about GPT being the Trojan horse into the Apple ecosystem for Microsoft, if you think so, Google pays Apple, I think it's around $18 billion per year
Yeah.
for the partnership. And that makes sense so long as Google has really relevant ads and is able to monetize that as well. But if you go to this future vision of its generative AI and the things it knows about you, like you're describing, where have you been? What have you looked at? Who have you talked to? And that becomes more of a search signal. Then, yeah, maybe GPT becomes a much stronger ads partner and could take over in that way. Now, I think ultimately for us as advertisers, we're still going to do the same things we do. We're still going to have to come up with great creative, great messaging. We'll have to define audiences, and whether that ultimately leads to, through Apple, getting ads on the Microsoft ecosystem or the Google ecosystem, it really does make a difference. Because one point that I've been making for a while is, as people maybe freak out a little bit about Gen AI and is that going to change like searches and how people do search? At the end of the day, there's like an addressable universe of how many conversions exist for a certain thing. And a simple example, like there's going to be 10,000 toilets in the United States that get clogged every day. And then that defines how many plumbers we need. And how people find those plumbers, sure, that's something we need to worry about. But the fact remains that these 10,000 people are going to look for help in one way or another. And we just need to make sure that we're there in the most helpful manner possible.
I was going to say, on the subject of being helpful, I have an absolute shameless plug for Optimizer's new product launch of Amazon's local service ads, which are display ads or non-endemic ads, because those are able to take Amazon's purchasing signals. So things you've bought before, your Amazon garage, your Amazon Prime streaming habits, your Whole Foods grocery shopping, all of that, and let users target ads based off those services.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's an amazing audience targeting capability using a lot of signals that just haven't been accessible in the past. And the thing is with Amazon advertising, a lot of people think about that as advertising on behalf of someone who is selling something on Amazon, but Amazon's going way beyond it. And that's what they call it non-endemic, which really, it took me several weeks to understand what they meant by that.
Correct.
But non-endemic basically means you don't have to be on the Amazon ecosystem, but you're taking the signals from Amazon, and then that's enabling you to put your ads out. And then those ad clicks can lead to your website, and you can sell them something even if they don't have to purchase it through Fulfilled by Amazon sort of a deal. Very exciting. And like you said, we've got a product capability. So in Optimizer, you can set up your Amazon account. You can enable that capability, and we'll even give you $500 to spend on that. So it's a no-brainer to test out, especially if you're already doing display network or MSAN from Microsoft through Optimizer.
And I do need to give a shout out to Amazon, apart from our work, which, I mean, we shamelessly want to plug all of the Optimizer stuff, but Amazon does deserve a lot of credit and kudos for their lead gen ad type that also recently launched. So you don't even have to drive traffic to your site. You do need to have a business email. Otherwise, the verification process will take quite a bit. But Amazon will actually let you set up conversion actions off of leads. So think the meta ads, but lead gen. Again, we're very excited about it, but just when we're talking about Apple and kind of the future of ad products, I think too many people ignore Amazon in that conversation. And as we think about what's relevant, definitely want to make sure that Amazon is part of that conversation. All right, so there's one more topic I had, but I want to also just make sure that if anyone has questions for the number one PPC influencer, which was the title of Fred's SMX talk, hacks from the number one PPC influencer and how he gets all those things done, make sure to leave them in the comments. We're always happy to address those questions.
You've been putting out some amazing content on social as well as on the Optimizer blog. And the latest one that you have is a study on Google's pausing of keywords that don't have any impressions. So tell us a little bit about exactly what Google's doing and some of the buzz and maybe some of the negativity we noticed in the community.
Yeah, so I'll admit I was very surprised at the negativity. It's actually what prompted the study. So Google announced that they're going to be pausing any keyword that has 0 impressions over 13 months. They announced this a little while back. We dug into the data and looked at accounts that have different ratios of paused keywords and different size of accounts, so whether they're small, medium, or big. And what we found is that while most advertisers will be impacted, they're not actually going to see performance losses. They may even see performance gains. So this should help calm the two main fears. Fear number one is that clients of the clients, so i.e. the advertisers' stakeholders, are demanding that keywords be active. So this should either help them understand that they need to let that keyword go, or it'll at least empower them to create kind of a wild and crazy idea campaign that they can have those client requests in and leave it alone. And by the way, all those paused keywords you can re-enable. They'll pause again if they don't have any data in 3 months, but that's okay. The other perspective is that Google shouldn't be doing this because it is overstep. There were a number of folks that felt that if Google is doing this, where's the line between platform and strategist? However, again, speaking to how the accounts actually perform and how many accounts will be shifting towards small after this change, I can't help but think that this is Google almost bringing people current with strategy, that if you have a lot of older accounts that maybe used to bid on every single keyword and that you'd have some legacy ideas just left over, it's ultimately a net positive.
Yeah, and what kind of strategy is it to have keywords in your account that literally haven't done anything in 13 months? If that's your strategy, you might want to reevaluate. Let me maybe make a controversial statement here, but listen, if you're going to take what Google is trying to do, which is clean up accounts and stuff that doesn't add any value, it still costs Google money to keep all of these keywords in the system, and the infrastructure that Google has to run is very expensive. And so if people are going to keep fighting it, then sure, maybe Google's going to figure out, let's add another data center. And who's going to pay for that? It's going to be advertisers. And even thinking about that from an environmental perspective, like these keywords that you keep lying around, they cause emissions, probably not huge emissions, but you put that all together and the millions of advertisers, and it does have an impact on the world. So that's what I caution against. Don't have that knee-jerk reaction, but think about it and do what's right for your business, but also consider that what you're doing has an impact on the broader world. All right, Navah, any other things that you've been noticing this week that might be important?
So this actually, I noticed right before we hopped on the call, TikTok has updated their upload time to 60 minutes or 1 hour, which blows my mind because it essentially is a declaration of war on YouTube and Twitch and all the long format live streaming services. And what is so interesting about this is that during GML, all I could think of is, wow, Google is coming for TikTok's market share, going for it. They're going to pick up those users that are about to lose their platform since it got banned. But I actually wonder if part of this is a play to let them be present still in the US and also to kind of court that older demographic that maybe prefers a podcast format, that prefers long form format, that wants to actually sit and dig into a topic. So for those of you that want to experiment with the 60 minutes, I'm going to absolutely do that with some webinar content and see how that goes, particularly because I love TikTok's upload and sharing functionality. And I often will take TikTok videos and put them other places. So this is a fun way for TikTok to also get content from other sources. But definitely experiment. Let your users know if you're going to actually do 60 minutes or 1 hour, because there's nothing worse than you start a video and then you have to stop it in the middle.
Yeah, no, I love the whole 60-minute thing, 1 hour. So great. I'll be in Cannes at the Marketing Festival next week. So we'll come to you with some updates on that. I know we're also sponsoring a number of PPC and digital marketing events.
Yes. So we are very happy to be sending a lot of love to all of our amazing friends at MinSearch. And I am so proud that we are the recording sponsor for Women in Tech SEO, the US version. Big shout out to Arij. I think she just shared that this is officially break even. So now everything else is profit. Arij does this, and the Women in Tech SEO group does this specifically to create a place where women can feel empowered to lean into their tech chops. There are a lot of folks that kind of shy away from that optimizer. Even if Fred doesn't want to shamelessly plug it, I will shamelessly plug it. We are a heavy women tech role led team. I don't have the exact percentage of our team, but it's definitely majority are women. And it is a beautiful thing to be able to support all the amazing perspectives that are going to speak in September, Women in Tech SEO, and then this Friday, MinSearch. So we're delighted to enable those events. We're delighted to see all those amazing PPC voices shine.
Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll come back next week with more updates. But if you want to be notified when these are live, go ahead and subscribe and do follow Navah and my